Welcome to Write This Way, episode 6. And today I'm going to look at the question of writing scenes full of emotion. This is in response to a request from a person who's been following these videos. So it shows that if you do want to have a particular theme covered, just drop me a message and I'll hopefully get round to it. Anyway, so writing scenes full of emotion. This is very similar, the problems that arise are very similar to writing action scenes. So I thought I'd do tomorrow's episode about action. It's because you're trying to write so much that you're almost tripping over yourself to get across what you're trying to say. You might have, for example, emotions running very fast inside a character, which is a bit similar to a lot of action happening all at once. Anyway, it also is personally something I love writing. I enjoy those moments when things really kick off between two characters. So it's almost like something I look forward to when I'm writing a book. And if it's going well, the writing often takes off and I don't really feel as though I'm intervening very much. It just sort of flows. So I hope that you get that experience when you're writing too. It's not always the case though, because sometimes the emotions that you're covering can be difficult or painful, or you're working through something. Anyway, so what I thought we would do is look at 4 kinds of ways of doing emotion, and then look in more detail to something that I've done in one of my books. I'm going to use Finding Sky as my example, and then after that I'll set you your homework. So first of all, thinking about writing emotion as some kind of impassioned speech. You know what, it's a sort of emotive, there could be a rallying call or an argument, something like that. But in the case of a love story, it's that moment of declaration. And I was thinking about ones I remembered from books I've read, and the one that came to mind is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Now this book, I know very well because I adapted it for stage, so I got to sort of understand its ins and outs. And there's a moment towards the end when Pip finally gets to declare his feelings to Estella. He's feeling hopeless because she's about to marry somebody else who's all wrong for her. And I thought I would show you the passage. If I hold this up, you'll see that it starts here and goes all down and carries on over there. So that's a kind of Victorian way of writing. It would feel a bit overmuch perhaps in a modern novel, but yeah, your choice. Anyway, I thought I'd read you a bit and you'll get to hear just what's going on. So Estella says to Pip, "You will get me out of your thoughts in a week." Now that's like a red rag to a bull, and this is Pip's answer. "Out of my thoughts? You are the part of my existence, part of myself. You have been in every line I have ever read since I first came here, the rough common boy whose poor heart you wounded even then. You have been in every prospect I have ever seen since, on the river, on the sails of the ships, on the marshes, in the clouds, in the light, in the darkness, in the wind, in the woods, in the sea, in the streets." And so it goes on. Now, clearly, one of the things I discovered when adapting this for the stage, that you can't really make that into a real person's speech. It just seems too much and too long, the idea that someone would declaim. But it's not really about realism in that sense. It's more about an experience that you're entering into. So as a reader, you're dipping into that and being pushed along like you've joined the current of his feeling, which in a book all about rivers is quite a good image. So that's what I would say as emotion as a sort of impassioned speech, to be used knowingly and wisely, but that's an option. Then there's emotion that's conveyed indirectly, a sort of misdirection, and I've chosen The Great Gatsby for that. See, I've got an old copy here which I got at, I think, Oxfam, and I've chose the scene where Gatsby and Daisy get to meet round at Nick's house, And there's a sort of lots of unspoken things going on here. And Nick's standing outside the door whilst they have their reunion. And he hears from outside the door that the reintroduction is a sort of a awkward moment. And he says, a pause. It endured horribly. I had nothing to do in the hall, so I went into the room. Gatsby, his hands still in his pockets, was reclining against the mantelpiece in a strained counterfeit of perfect ease, even of boredom. His head leaned back so far that it rested against the face of a defunct mantelpiece clock, and from this position his distraught eyes stared down at Daisy, who was sitting, frightened but graceful, on the edge of a stiff chair. We've met before, muttered Gatsby. His eyes glanced momentarily at me, and his lips parted with an abortive attempt at a laugh. Luckily, the clock took this moment to tilt dangerously at the pressure of his head, whereon he turned and caught it with trembling fingers and set it back in place. And he then apologises for moving the clock. But the clock stands for all sorts of things. The fact you can't turn back the clock, the fact that this is a broken relationship. There's all sorts of imagery you can read into that, all sorts of meaning. But it forms a sort of, I suppose, another witness on that scene of things that aren't said. So sometimes you can use an object or something that repeats to carry the emotion for you, and that's what the clock is doing. Okay, a third approach is what I would call emotional scenes carried through silence. Now this is really great stuff. One of my favourites is Persuasion by Jane Austen. In Persuasion, Anne Elliot, who refused the young Captain Wentworth when they were both not much out of their teens, and she has the horrible experience of meeting him later when he's successful, now a captain, and he's courting other girls in the neighbourhood, ones she knows. And so she spends a lot of the book as this sort of suffering, silent witness to what's going on. It's her silence that's full of emotion. And it's also what isn't said. So the first time they meet again is at a dinner party, and the Admiral, who is the host, is talking about Captain Wentworth's career. And he is innocently referring to the moment when he got promotion to a command. Captain Wentworth got his first ship. And Anne is sitting there listening. And so the Admiral says, lucky fellow to get anything so soon with no more interest than his. I felt my luck, Admiral, I assure you, replied Captain Wentworth seriously. I was as well satisfied with my appointment as you can desire. It was a great object with me at that time to be at sea, a very great object. I wanted to be doing something. And what you understand if you're picking up the signals in the book is that he's referring to the fact he was rejected by Anne. He doesn't openly say it, but the silence about it shows that it's still an emotional thing for him. That repetition. It was a great object with me at that time to be at sea, a very great object. That tells you that he's still feeling the echo of the emotions, even though he thinks he's over it. So yeah, that's a wonderful way to subtly inject emotion into a dinner party. And then, of course, there's the understatement, the emotional understatement. This might fit the style of the book that you're writing. Too much screaming of emotion in a book is hard to read as a reader. You have to judge your moments, not have too many mountain peaks. But some books actually make a study of restrained emotion. And the one that came to mind when I was thinking about that was The Remains of the Day, where Stevens, the butler, is all about what he doesn't express. He's locked into his role as a butler, and he's sort of lost how to interact normally with people, and this is catastrophic to him as a person. Great book, by the way, so another one you might want to read. And so that is emotion as understatement. It's almost too much about what he doesn't say in this book to actually quote. But take it from me that if you want to learn how to do understated emotion, this would be a good place to go. Okay, so that's 4 techniques I've talked about. Let's look at a passage in Finding Sky. I'm going to split screen it so that you can see what I'm talking about. In Finding Sky, I picked, which is a young adult novel, I picked a moment where my character Zed is feeling particularly angry and scared. He and Sky, the heroine, have just been out for a walk and they got shot at for reasons which become clear in the plot. And I looked at this and was asking myself, how did I construct the emotion in this scene? So the first thing I noticed is I used an element of small, short staccato sentences to build up. So first of all, you got Zed saying, it's not okay, we're supposed to be safe here. That's the yellow highlight. So his anger is meaning he can't speak. He's so angry, he's almost sort of, that feeling you get. And then I let him run until you get the bit where he is able to express a bit more, and that's the orange highlight. Can you see how it builds up through questions? And I'm supposed to be okay with that. I go for a walk with you and get shot at, and I'm not supposed to wonder why. So that use of the question allows the opening up to emotion with what then follows is you almost died. And then I allow him a couple of exclamations. Try not to do too much of this. I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at the people who just tried to kill us. So that's when you got your exclamations. And then one question you will have to think about is, how do you exit from scenes of high emotion? And one strategy is, which is what I've done here, is you do the something humorous to undercut it. So we have here the pink highlight. This is Sky picking up on something he's said, which is her attempt to diffuse it. He's mentioned that he saw this walk as a date and she hadn't known. So she says, this was a date. You asked me here on like a date and I missed it. So this allows us to step down from the high emotion and go into the rest of the scene. So this is just a little incident in a much longer novel, but I thought it'd be interesting to show you how I thought about the architecture of it. Short sentences, a build up, a bit of exclamation, and then a sort of unwinding. And writing emotion, in fact, is all about your own emotional control, because you have to control the prose so it carries the emotion with it. Right, so there you go. That is my little introduction to writing emotional scenes. As ever, there is always much more to be said. But don't forget those 4 ways that I thought about: the impassioned language, the misdirection or indirection, where you use something else to carry the emotion. Silence is great for emotion, and the understatement. And your homework is to go away and find 2 or 3 favourite emotional passages in literature and unpack them and see which of those strategies has been used, and maybe you'll find more strategies. Please do send comments in so I can learn some things too. Anyway, so that's it for now, and I hopefully will see you tomorrow.